I'll read to you a quote from an article posted on August 11th, 2020. The headline is this: "This is reparations. Black Lives Matter holds rally to support suspects in recent Chicago looting." And here is the quote. Members of Black Lives Matter Chicago held a rally on Monday night in support of more than 100 people arrested following widespread looting and rioting in the city the night prior. Speaking at the rally outside a police station in the South Loop, where organizers said the suspected looters are in custody, organizer Ariel Atkins excused the looting, which reportedly caused at least $60 million in property damage and left 13 police officers injured, calling the theft reparations, NBC Chicago reported. "I don't care if someone decides to loot a Gucci or a Macy's or a Nike store, because that makes sure that person eats," Ariel Atkins, a Black Lives Matter organizer, said. "That makes sure that person has clothes. That is reparations," Atkins added. "Anything they wanted to take, they can take it because these businesses have insurance." The idea of reparations being paid to African Americans as recompense for slavery during the Civil War era is a hot topic and has been for quite a while. The Associated Press Newark Center for Public Affairs Research polled 1,300 Black, white, and Hispanic Americans in 2019 on whether or not reparations for slavery should be paid to the descendants of slaves. 75% of Black respondents said yes, whereas 15% of white participants supported the idea. On June 2020, Fox News reported Robert Johnson, the founder of Black Entertainment Television, said it's time America atones for slavery and systemic racism by paying African Americans reparations to make them economically equal to white Americans. Johnson, the first Black billionaire in the United States, has put a price tag on the debt America owes to African Americans at $14 trillion. And on June 11th, 2020, CBS reported this.
The California Assembly passed a proposal to establish a task force to study and prepare recommendations on giving reparations to African Americans. If the bill passes the Senate and is signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom, 8 people with backgrounds in racial justice reforms would lead a study into who would be eligible for compensation and how much would be awarded. The panel would start meeting no later than June 2021. Katie Johnston for CBS 13 News.
All this talk and outrage around reparations being owed to the descendants of slaves made me wonder, how come slaves were not paid reparations when they were originally emancipated by Abraham Lincoln? Well, I did a bit of research and it turns out they were paid reparations shortly after being freed from slavery. So that being the case, what's up with all this talk today about reparations if ex-slaves were paid off back then? Well, I'm going to share a few historical facts with you that will blow your mind after this word from my sponsor. This podcast is brought to you by Black History Quiz, because it takes more than a month to learn our history. History is not black and white. It's complicated. America was built on slave labor, yet blacks owned slaves as well. The Republican Party was founded to abolish slavery, but today most blacks vote Democrat. And sometimes, just sometimes, African kings marry white. No matter the race, people are complicated, filled with contradictions, and change with the times. To view history through the lenses of today's culture cheats the learner of the full story. Black History Quiz is a newsletter that shares facts you might not have learned in school and certainly did not learn from mainstream media. Black History Quiz educates, sparks debate, and often puts history in a brand new light. Visit blackhistoryquiz.com and subscribe to the weekly newsletter. No matter your perspective of history, you will not be disappointed. blackhistoryquiz.com. 40 acres and a mule was what the U.S. government promised to newly freed slaves, and it was the first systematic attempt to provide reparations to African Americans. If this promise had played out as originally intended, oh, what a different country we would have today. At the very least, race relations would be totally different than they are right now. Okay, so what happened? The information I'm about to share is from the very intriguing book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro by Henry Louis Gates Jr. I highly recommend it. Here is a very long quote. The source of the policy of 40 acres and a mule was Union General William T. Sherman's Special Field Order No. 15, issued on January 16, 1865. By this order, 400,000 acres of land, a strip of coastline stretching from Charleston, South Carolina, to the St. Johns River in Florida, including Georgia's Sea Islands and the mainland 30 miles in from the coast, as the historian Barton Myers reports, was to be redistributed to the newly freed slaves. This idea for massive land redistribution was actually the result of a discussion that Sherman and Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton held 4 days before Sherman issued the order with 20 leaders of the black community in Savannah, Georgia, where Sherman was headquarters following his famous march. Stanton had suggested to Sherman that they gather the leaders of the local Negro community and ask them something no one else had apparently thought to ask. What do you want for your own people following the war? Stanton and Sherman met with the black ministers on January 12th on the second floor of Charles Greene's mansion on Savannah-Macon Street. The abolitionists Charles Sumner, Thaddeus Stevens, and other radical Republicans, I'll say that again. The abolitionists Charles Sumner, Thaddeus Stevens, and other radical Republicans had been advocating land redistribution to break the back of Southern slaveholders' power, as Meyer observes. But Sherman's plan took shape only after the ministers' meeting. In its broadest strokes, 40 acres and a mule was their idea. Their chosen leader and spokesman, Garrison Frazier, told Sherman and Stanton that the Negro wanted land. Quote, the way we can best take care of ourselves, Reverend Frazier began, is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor, and we can soon maintain ourselves and have something to spare. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own. And when asked where the freed slaves would rather live, whether scattered among the whites or in colonies by yourselves, Brother Frazier replied without missing a beat, I would prefer to live by ourselves, for there is a prejudice against us in the South that will take years to get over. When polled individually around the table, all but one, James Lynch, 26, who had moved south from Baltimore, said that they agreed with Frazier. 4 days later, Sherman issued Special Field Order No. 15 after President Lincoln approved it. The effect throughout the South was electric. As the historian Eric Foner explains, the freedmen hastened to take advantage of the order. Baptist minister Ulysses L. Houston, a member of the group that had met with Sherman, led 1,000 blacks to Skidaway Island, Georgia, where they established a self-governing community with Houston as the black governor. And by June, 40,000 freedmen had been settled on 400,000 acres of Sherman land. Sherman later ordered that the army could lend the new settlers mules, hence the phrase, 40 acres and a mule. So reparations were paid. 40 acres and a mule was a done deal, and blacks were settled on the land promised by the U.S. government. It was supposed to be a happy ending, and it almost was, until Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Once that happened, his vice president Andrew Johnson took over, and President Andrew Johnson was a Southern sympathizer and not a friend to black folks. In the fall of 1865, he overturned the reparations deal, Special Order No. 15, also known as 40 acres and a mule, and gave ownership of the land back to the Southern states. the very people who had declared war against the United States of America. You have been listening to the Things I Think About podcast. If you love what you heard, hate what you heard, or don't know what you just heard, I want to know about it. Drop me an email. I can be reached at Jim Stroud, that's JIMSTROUD, @jimstroud.com. So, until next time, bye-bye.